Hey, hey, hey. Hey, everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me. I don't usually go live on camera, but I felt compelled to do that today because I was thinking about when in my work, chronic illness is not actually what people think. So I just want to tell you a little bit about somebody that I worked with a few years ago, and it was a really cool story. And it may highlight a little bit more about the kind of work that can be done when it comes to desperation. And I had a client who had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and had been living with medication and a diminished lifestyle and was very depressed because her life was misery because of fibromyalgia, just constant pain and not functioning at a high level. And so um, she called me. I had a discovery call with her. And what was interesting about the discovery call is I had come to the decision that I was going to be very, very upfront about my spiritual practice because that's the kind of work I wanted to do. And she said, "Oh, I have fibromyalgia." And I said, "Well, I'm not an expert in fibromyalgia. I've worked with that a couple of times, but the way I would work with it is from a spiritual framework." And I just expected her to be like, "Well, forget it," because that does happen. And she said, "Yes, that's what I need." And so she came in for the session. I think we did two total, but this is how exploratory work goes. You come in with a concern or a complaint, and we just start exploring it together. And what had happened, the story is incredible, is she was brought back to the very first time that the symptoms started to show up in her life. And lo and behold, it was at a time where there was a very significant event in her life, which was she purchased a new house. And when she and her partner were walking around the property, they were exploring and, getting familiar with the land, and went out and there was a garden. And in the session, she was able to recall that there was a spiritual being in the garden with her. And it turned out that it was a child that had previously lived in that house and had died of a chronic illness as a child. Now, I don't want to give away too many identifying details, but I'll back up a little bit. My client, as it turns out, is someone who was very, very spiritually open. However, like many of us spiritually open people, as children, we see things that scare the daylights out of us. Seeing other beings, seeing people's auras, knowing things that even the grown-ups don't know. And so what happens in so many of these cases are people shut it down. They make a choice. I'm not going to tune into that. But what happened with this client is she was looking for something to help her open up. So when expanded states of consciousness or hypnotic session is happening, the client's filters can open up and they can perceive all that was there, that their current human framework does not necessarily feel comfortable navigating. But in the session, it can all be open. So that's what happened. It was like a eureka moment. Oh my gosh. It was this little child who had some sort of paralysis or chronic illness that she ended up dying at a very young age. And this child stayed in the astral and was confused. So was an earthbound soul. And this confused soul saw the energy of my client and jumped into her field. Now, the only way that this would be possible is if her field was open. That's another thing that we ended up exploring too, is what in your field was available to make this attachment happen. So as soon as this energy jumped into her field, you can imagine what happened. The transference of the energy of this child, of this chronic illness came into her field, and she started to exhibit this chronic illness. And medical doctors, modern Western technology, is not going to identify a spirit attachment. So the diagnosis was no other than fibromyalgia. So in the session, we asked what needs to happen here. And so when a confused soul is attached to an earth human, they are usually not aware that they've passed. And so they need to be crossed over. And I can talk about how that happens in my work in another session. But I just wanted to share that with you because what happened is we crossed over the little girl, and then my client immediately started feeling a difference in her life on many levels. Not only was her pain starting to subside, but she was able to get rid of the medication that she needed. And she also was able to expand into her previously wide open clairvoyance, clairsentience. She was talking to other beings in a mediumistic way, and her life was forever changed. And so in this work, it doesn't take very much time. It's just how it shows up for you. And I am not here to pronounce that I cure anything. That is not what this work is. This work is about helping you to open to accessing what your soul already knows to be true. And that is how expanded states of consciousness work. Whether you're going to a person who is a well-trained hypnotic practitioner, a person who's helping support you in a psychedelic experience, holotropic breath work, um, any practitioner an energy healer that can help you access your own information. That is my preference for self-healing, because what it does is it helps you to access your soul knowing and help you become a sovereign being, which is what my book is all about, The Sacred Middle Finger. But each person has their own unique thing. That's the phase, that's the era that we're in, is people are starting to recognize that the experience that they're having in life is unique to them, and that they don't have to fit into a cookie cutter in order to live the life that they came here to come to. But there's this transition into, you know, you know, you could call it ego death. What is my life going to look like if I don't agree with the mainstream idea of who I am or who I should be? And when that starts to go out the window, there can be a collapse of, well, what do I do? How do I do it? How am I going to, and how am I going to know where I'm headed? And so having a supportive environment to help you reconstruct that, so that you can start to calibrate to new data points that are resourced within you as opposed to externally. Um, I also heard an amazing story yesterday, and I want to kind of figure out how I can share it with you. But it was, I'm really fascinated by true crime. And primarily as a woman, it's to understand what is it that motivates people to do things in this dark way. And we can explore that in the future. But this woman was abducted, and the guy who did the abductions, this was in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, I think, like in the 70s. And he had this belief that if he impregnated and women, that he could create his own super group. I'm just going to say group. And so he was kidnapping women right off the streets, but this one woman was able to escape. And that story, I'll keep it on a cliffhanger, but it's a super fascinating story, and I love the resilience that this woman endured. And I'm so curious about what drives and motivates a soul to live that kind of experience in life. Um, because from the work that I do, this is all choice. Our souls are not forced to be here. They want to be here, because when you can manifest like that in the spirit realm and you can go anywhere and do anything, and you are an eternal consciousness, you might want to mix it up a little bit. And so not everybody goes to Earth as a school. There are different planetary dimensional realms for consciousnesses to experience lives and experiences. But Earth is a very particular kind of gritty school type experience. And I love hearing people's stories. I've actually considered redoing my podcast to discuss more of this stuff. But I'm curious what you all are thinking, and what lights you up. And yeah, I'm just listening to what my soul guidance is telling me to do. So we'll see what we come up with next. All right. Have a good one.